Far from Earth, in the silent void of space, a massive observation vessel floated in orbit around a distant star. Its sleek surface shimmered, a marvel of alien engineering designed to avoid detection. Within the ship, a species known as the Threxians, a highly advanced and analytical race, studied the transmissions they had intercepted from Earth. For decades, the Threxians had been monitoring humanity, finding themselves equal parts fascinated and horrified by the beings on this small, unassuming planet. The leader of the observation team, Vrylock, stood before a massive holographic screen displaying clips from Earth's history. Images of great battles, human explorers traversing hostile environments, and even individuals performing acts of self-sacrifice played on an endless loop. Vrylock's elongated, translucent fingers hovered over the control panel, replaying one particularly chilling moment, a firefighter plunging into a burning building to save a stranger. The human did not hesitate, even as the flames licked at their skin. "This species defies reason," Vrylock murmured, his voice resonating in the chamber with a soft hum. He turned to his second-in-command, Alaris, who was analyzing the physiological data of humans. They face death without the primal terror that governs most sentient life. How is this possible? Alaris hesitated, her iridescent eyes reflecting the light of the holograms. "It's not that they don't feel fear," she said, gesturing to a chart displaying elevated adrenaline levels in humans during dangerous situations. "Their bodies react. Their instincts scream for self-preservation. And yet, they override it." The Threxians, a species that had mastered longevity and lived without the constant specter of mortality, found this deeply unsettling. They themselves avoided danger at all costs. To the Threxians, survival was the ultimate goal, and fear was the mechanism that ensured it. Watching humans willingly face their end, whether in war, exploration, or even acts of kindness, was something they could neither comprehend nor ignore. One of the younger researchers, Clyra, stepped forward. "Perhaps they are simply reckless. Their lifespan is short compared to ours. Maybe they value their lives less, because they expect them to end quickly." Vrylock shook his head. "No. Their art, their literature, their history, everything about them suggests they value life immensely. They mourn their dead, sometimes for years. And yet, when faced with the prospect of death, they rise. It is not recklessness. It is something else." The room fell silent as a new transmission began playing. It was a recording from World War II, showing soldiers storming a beach under heavy gunfire. The humans charged forward even as their comrades fell around them. The Threxians watched, transfixed, as one soldier, barely more than a boy, threw himself on a grenade to save his squad. The explosion consumed him, but his actions ensured the survival of the others. "Madness," Clyra whispered, her voice trembling. "Who would willingly do such a thing?" "It's not madness," Vrylock said, his tone grim. "It's something more dangerous. They call it bravery." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Bravery. The Threxians had no equivalent concept. In their society, avoiding risk was considered intelligent, and self-preservation was celebrated. The idea of sacrificing oneself for others was not just foreign, it was terrifying. Alaris tapped into the ship's database, pulling up more information on the human concept of bravery. "It seems to be tied to their belief systems," she said. "They have religions that teach them to value the collective over the individual. Philosophies that glorify facing adversity. And their stories, they are filled with heroes who die for causes greater than themselves." "Stories," Vrylock muttered, his brow furrowing. "They are a story-driven species. They construct narratives, to give meaning to their lives and deaths. Could it be that these narratives are what enable them to face mortality without fear?" The holographic display shifted to show a human astronaut standing on the surface of the moon. The Threxians marveled at the stark contrast between the fragile human figure and the vast, hostile expanse of space. The astronaut raised a flag, an act of defiance against the void. It was a silent declaration: "We are here, and we are unafraid." "They do not fear the unknown," Vrylock said, his voice tinged with awe. "They conquer it. The ship's data analysts began compiling reports, trying to quantify the psychological and cultural factors that made humans unique. But every answer only raised more questions. Why did they risk their lives for strangers? How could they endure unimaginable hardships and emerge stronger? What drove them to explore, to fight, to sacrifice? Clyra, still visibly shaken, voiced the concern that was beginning to spread among the crew. If they do not fear death, how can they be stopped? If they see danger not as a deterrent but as a challenge, what's to prevent them from becoming unstoppable? The room grew quiet again as the implications sank in. The Threxians had observed countless species across the galaxy, and every one of them was governed by fear. It was the great equalizer, the force that kept civilizations in check. But humanity was different. Their lack of fear made them unpredictable, and unpredictability was the greatest threat of all. We need to understand them, Vrylok said, breaking the silence. Not just their behavior, but their minds, their hearts. If we fail to do so, they will remain an enigma, and a potential danger to us all. Ilaris nodded. Then we must go to them. Observing from a distance is no longer sufficient. We need to study them up close. The decision was made. The Threxians would send a team of disguised operatives to Earth, embedding themselves among humans to learn their secrets. It was a risky mission, but the stakes were too high to ignore. As the ship prepared for its next phase of operations, Vrylok stared at the holographic screen, now displaying an image of Earth glowing like a blue gem against the blackness of space. His thoughts were a tumult of curiosity and apprehension. Humans, he said softly, almost to himself. You are either the most extraordinary species we have ever encountered, or the most dangerous. And with that, the stage was set for the Threxians' journey to uncover the truth about humanity's fear, or lack thereof. Little did they know, their quest for understanding would lead to revelations that would shake the very foundations of their beliefs. The Threxian vessel hovered on the edge of Earth's solar system, cloaked from human detection. On board, the team of operatives prepared for their journey to Earth. Disguising themselves as humans was no small feat, their physiology was vastly different. However, with advanced morphing technology and months of training, they could emulate human form and behavior convincingly. Vrylok stood at the head of the preparation chamber, addressing the operatives. His translucent form had already shifted, taking on the appearance of a middle-aged human male. His new body felt alien to him, denser, heavier, and far less efficient than his natural state. Yet, it was a necessity for the mission. You are not merely observers, Vrylok said, his voice calm yet commanding. You are explorers of the human psyche. Our survival may depend on what you uncover. Blend in, observe, and learn. But above all, avoid suspicion. The team consisted of 3 operatives, Clyra, who had taken on the guise of a young woman with dark hair and sharp features, Ilaris, now appearing as an older man with graying hair and kind eyes, and Tarek, the youngest of the group, whose athletic build and confident demeanor made him resemble an energetic college student. Each had been assigned a specific role in human society, designed to give them access to different facets of human life. Clyra would embed herself in academia, posing as a graduate student in anthropology. Her role was to study human history, culture, and belief systems from the inside. Ilaris, with his calm and wise demeanor, would take on the role of a psychologist, giving him direct access to human emotions and thought processes. Tarek, the most adaptable of the group, would immerse himself in urban life, working as a barista in a bustling city to observe human interactions in their rawest form. As the team finalized their preparations, Clyra approached Vrylok with a look of unease. Commander, I still don't understand why we are doing this. Humanity's lack of fear is unsettling, yes, but is it truly a threat to us? Vrylok studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Imagine a species that cannot be deterred by fear. A species that sees obstacles not as barriers, but as challenges. They are driven by something we cannot yet comprehend. If they turn their gaze outward, to the stars, he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Clyra nodded reluctantly. She understood the logic, but it did little to ease her apprehension. The infiltration began under the cover of night. Using a small shuttle cloaked in advanced stealth technology, the operatives descended to Earth, landing in a remote area outside a major city. The first moments on the planet were overwhelming. The air was dense with scents and sounds, the sky alive with stars that seemed unnaturally close compared to the Threxian homeworld. Ilaris took a deep breath, his human lungs expanding uncomfortably. "The atmosphere feels aggressive," he remarked, adjusting to the strange sensations. Tarek grinned, his human face making the expression feel oddly authentic. "It's invigorating. No wonder they thrive here." The team split up, each heading to their assigned locations. Their mission was clear: live among the humans, observe their behavior, and gather as much data as possible. Clara's journey. Clara enrolled at a prestigious university, her fabricated credentials easily accepted by the humans. She quickly immersed herself in lectures and discussions, focusing on human rituals and the concept of bravery. In her first seminar, a professor spoke about ancient warriors and their willingness to die for their tribes and nations. Human bravery, the professor said, pacing the room, is not just a reaction to fear, it's a choice to confront it. From the Spartans at Thermopylae to modern firefighters, humans have always found ways to transcend their instincts. Clara furiously took notes, fascinated by the human's ability to transform fear into something constructive. But as she listened, she couldn't shake the unease that crept into her mind. What if bravery wasn't just a trait, but a weapon? Ilaris observations. Ilaris established himself as a practicing psychologist, his fabricated identity granting him immediate credibility. His sessions with patients revealed the depth of human emotions. He heard stories of heartbreak, trauma, and loss, but also tales of resilience and hope. One patient, a young woman recovering from a near-fatal car accident, spoke with quiet determination. "The doctors said I might not walk again, but I refused to accept that. Pain is temporary. Giving up is forever." Her words struck Ilaris like a blow. The Threxians avoided pain at all costs, yet humans embraced it as part of their growth. Each session deepened his understanding of the human psyche, but it also made him question his own species' values. Tarek's immersion. Tarek thrived in the chaotic environment of a busy cafe. Humans streamed in and out, their conversations ranging from trivial to profound. He overheard debates about politics, confessions of love, and even arguments over sports teams. One day, a homeless man entered the cafe, shivering from the cold. A young customer immediately offered him his coat and bought him a meal. The act was small, almost routine, but it left Tarek stunned. Such selflessness was rare among the Threxians, where resources were hoarded and survival was paramount. Tarek couldn't help but wonder, was this kindness another facet of their fearlessness? Did their willingness to help others stem from the same source as their bravery? As the weeks passed, the operatives gathered an overwhelming amount of data. They documented human rituals, analyzed their emotions, and tried to understand their motivations. But the more they learned, the more questions arose. Why did humans value sacrifice? How could they endure so much pain and still find joy? What drove them to face death with such defiance? Each operative reported their findings back to Vrylok, who monitored their progress from the ship. The information was invaluable, but it also painted a picture of a species that was far more complex, and far more dangerous, than the Threxians had anticipated. And as the team delved deeper into humanity's secrets, they began to realize that understanding humans might require more than observation. It might require them to confront truths about themselves and their own fear-driven existence. The infiltration was only the beginning. What came next would change everything, for the Threxians and for humanity. Clara had spent weeks at the university, absorbing every lecture, book, and cultural interaction she could find. Yet for all the data she gathered, the human mind remained an enigma. Her peers and professors spoke of bravery as though it were second nature, an intrinsic part of their identity. To Clara, this made no sense. Courage wasn't instinctual, it was a defiance of instinct. Determined to dig deeper, Clara decided to conduct her own study. She signed up for a community program that paired students with military veterans to help bridge the gap between civilians and those who had faced war. The program promised a rare opportunity to speak with individuals who had confronted death head-on. Her assigned partner was Sergeant Daniel Reyes, a decorated veteran in his early 30s. His olive-toned skin bore faint scars, and his dark eyes carried a weight that Clara couldn't ignore. They met at a small coffee shop near campus, the earthy aroma of brewed beans filling the air. "You're the student, right?" Daniel asked, his voice steady but cautious. "Yes," Clara replied, forcing a smile. Her human disguise was flawless, but maintaining its appearance required constant focus. "I'm Kira," she said, using the alias her team had given her. Daniel nodded and gestured for her to sit. "What do you want to know?" Clara hesitated. How could she ask a question that wouldn't raise suspicion? "I'm trying to understand what motivates people to risk their lives for others," she said carefully. "Especially in situations where survival seems unlikely." Daniel chuckled, though it was a dry, humorless sound. "That's a big question," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You studying psychology or something?" "Something like that," Clara replied, making a mental note of his body language. His relaxed posture was at odds with the tension she sensed beneath the surface. "Well," Daniel began, "it's not something you think about in the moment. When you're out there, in the middle of it all, it's not about fear or courage. It's about your team. The people next to you. You don't want to let them down." Clara leaned forward, intrigued. "So it's not about bravery?" Daniel shook his head. "Not in the way people think. It's about duty. Loyalty. Sometimes it's about anger or even desperation. But yeah, sometimes it's about bravery. The kind where you look death in the face and decide it doesn't get to win today." His words sent a chill through Clara. "And you've done that? Faced death?" Daniel's gaze grew distant. "More times than I can count," he admitted. "But the one that sticks with me," he paused, as though deciding whether to continue. "There was a kid. Barely 18. First deployment. We got hit with an ambush, and he froze. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I grabbed him, pulled him behind cover. Took a bullet in the process. Hurt like hell, but we both made it out alive." Clara's mind raced. The act Daniel described defied every principle of self-preservation. He had willingly placed himself in harm's way to save another. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do that?" Daniel frowned, as though the question itself was strange. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. The simplicity of his answer stunned Clara. Among the Threxians, the concept of the right thing was irrelevant compared to the survival of the individual. Here, it seemed, humans prioritized something greater. Over the next few weeks, Clara spent more time with Daniel, learning about his experiences and the values that drove him. He spoke of comrades who had sacrificed themselves to save others, of missions where survival seemed impossible but was achieved through sheer determination. One day, during a particularly candid conversation, Daniel asked her, "Why are you so interested in all this, anyway? You ask questions like you've never met a human before." Clara froze, her mind racing for an explanation. "I grew up isolated," she said, carefully crafting her words. "These ideas, bravery, sacrifice, they're new to me." Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Well, you're asking the right questions. Just don't forget that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and doing it anyway." Meanwhile, Ilaris and Tarek were conducting their own investigations, though their experiences were no less enlightening or unsettling. Ilaris encounter. Ilaris had been seeing a new patient, a retired surgeon named Dr. Eleanor Hayes. She was in her 70s, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun, and her piercing blue eyes carried a lifetime of stories. "Do you know what it's like," she asked during one session, "to hold someone's life in your hands? To know that one wrong move, one moment of hesitation, could end everything for them? Ilaris shook his head, genuinely curious. What kept you going? Dr. Hayes smiled faintly. The knowledge that I could make a difference. That even if I couldn't save everyone, I could save someone. And that mattered more than the fear. Her words echoed what Clara had heard from Daniel, reinforcing the idea that humans were driven by a sense of purpose that outweighed their fear of death. Tarek's encounter. Tarek, too, found himself grappling with the complexity of human courage. One evening, while closing the cafe, he struck up a conversation with a coworker named Mia. She told him about a time she had stood up to an armed robber, risking her life to protect a group of customers. I was terrified, she admitted. But I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Sometimes, you don't get to choose to be brave. It chooses you. As the operatives shared their findings with one another, a picture began to form. Humanity's fearlessness wasn't the absence of fear. It was their ability to act in spite of it. This revelation both fascinated and unsettled the Threxians. For Clara, her conversations with Daniel had an unexpected effect. She found herself admiring him, not just his bravery, but his unwavering belief in something greater than himself. It was a perspective she had never encountered before, and it left her questioning everything she thought she knew. But as the operatives delved deeper into human nature, they began to realize that understanding humanity's bravery would require more than observation. To truly grasp its essence, they would need to confront it themselves. The encounter was just the beginning. The real test was yet to come. The Threxian operatives had spent months immersing themselves in human society. Their mission was to observe, analyze, and report, but as their understanding of humanity deepened, so did their unease. Humanity's courage was not a quirk of evolution. It was a force that transcended logic, driven by a unique blend of emotion, belief, and sheer willpower. Clara, Ilaris, and Tarek met in a secluded spot to share their findings. They had chosen an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, far from prying eyes. The room was dimly lit, the faint hum of their cloaked surveillance devices, the only sound. Clara paced the floor, her expression troubled. Everything we've learned points to one conclusion: humans don't just survive, they thrive under conditions that would break us. Their willingness to face death, to risk everything for others, is unlike anything we've ever encountered. Ilaris nodded, his face grim. It's not just bravery. It's a belief in something greater than themselves. Purpose, morality, love. These concepts are foreign to us, yet they drive humans to achieve the impossible. Tarek leaned against a rusted metal pillar, his arms crossed. And that makes them dangerous, he said. If they ever look beyond their planet, if they see us as a threat. The group fell silent. The implications of their findings were clear. Humanity's fearlessness, combined with their ingenuity and determination, could make them a formidable force in the galaxy. The catalyst. The turning point came during a natural disaster. A massive earthquake struck the city, toppling buildings, and leaving thousands trapped beneath rubble. For the Threxians, it was an opportunity to observe human behavior under extreme conditions. Clara found herself in the heart of the chaos. Disguised as a volunteer, she joined rescue teams working tirelessly to save those trapped in the wreckage. The air was thick with dust and the cries of the injured, yet the humans pressed on with relentless determination. She worked alongside a man named Lucas, a firefighter who had been pulling people from the debris for hours without rest. His face was streaked with soot, his hands bruised and bloodied, yet he refused to stop. "Why do you keep going?" Clara asked during a brief pause. Lucas shot her a tired but resolute look. "Because someone has to. If it were me under there, I'd want someone to keep digging." His words struck Clara like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't just bravery, it was empathy, a willingness to endure pain for the sake of others. Ilaris' revelation. Ilaris had been treating patients at a makeshift medical camp set up in the aftermath of the earthquake. One patient, an elderly man named Samuel, had lost his home and nearly his life. Yet, as Ilaris listened to him speak, he was struck by the man's resilience. "I've lived through worse," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "This city will rebuild, and so will I." "That's what we do, we rebuild." Ilaris marveled at Samuel's optimism. The Threxians would have abandoned a disaster-stricken area, prioritizing survival over recovery. Yet here was a man who had lost everything, still clinging to hope. Tarek's challenge. Tarek found himself in the middle of a collapsing building, helping a group of civilians escape. Among them was a young girl clutching a stuffed animal, her eyes wide with fear. As the structure groaned and shifted, Tarek realized they were running out of time. "Go," he shouted, ushering the group toward an exit. "But what about you?" the girl's mother asked, her voice trembling. "I'll be right behind you," Tarek lied, knowing the chances of his escape were slim. The group made it out just as the building collapsed, trapping Tarek inside. For a moment, he panicked, his Threxian instincts screaming for self-preservation. But then he remembered the girl's face, her fear giving way to trust. Summoning every ounce of strength, Tarek pushed through the debris, eventually emerging into the open air. The group cheered, their gratitude palpable. For the first time, Tarek felt something he couldn't name, a sense of fulfillment that went beyond survival. The aftermath. When the operatives reconvened, they were no longer the same. The earthquake had forced them to confront humanity's greatest strength, their ability to find purpose in the face of despair. Clyra spoke first, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I thought I understood humans, but I was wrong. They don't fear death, because they live for something greater than themselves." Ilaris nodded. "Their courage isn't just a trait, it's a way of life. And it's contagious." Tarek leaned forward, his expression intense. "We've spent our lives avoiding risk, clinging to safety. But humans, they embrace the unknown. Maybe that's why they're so powerful." Vrylok's voice crackled through their communication devices. "Return to the ship immediately. We have what we need." But as the operatives prepared to leave, they couldn't shake the feeling that their mission was far from over. They had come to Earth to study humanity, but what they had discovered was something far more profound. The Threxians had always seen fear as a weakness, but perhaps it was their fearlessness that made humans truly extraordinary. And as they departed, they couldn't help but wonder, could the Threxians learn to live the same way? The abyss they had ventured into was not just the chaos of Earth, it was the depths of the human spirit. And they were only beginning to understand its power. Back aboard the Threxian ship, the operatives were met with an audience of their superiors. The Council of Analysts, a group of high-ranking Threxian strategists, gathered to hear their findings. The chamber was stark and sterile, with translucent walls that shimmered faintly, reflecting the nervous energy in the room. Vrylok stood before the council, the operatives at his side. "Report," commanded Arinox, the head of the council. His voice was sharp, his pale blue eyes narrowing as he studied the team. Clyra stepped forward, her human guise replaced by her natural Threxian form. "We have completed our mission. Humanity's behavior under extreme conditions is unlike anything we've observed in other species. Their ability to face death stems not from a lack of fear, but from a belief in something greater than themselves, whether it's loyalty, love, or purpose." The council murmured among themselves, their skepticism evident. "Belief?" Arinox scoffed. "How can belief be a force greater than fear? Fear is the ultimate motivator. It ensures survival." "That's where humans differ," Ilaris interjected. "For them, survival isn't the ultimate goal. They risk their lives for ideals, for each other, for things we would deem illogical." Arinox's expression darkened. "Illogical is dangerous. If they are willing to die for such trivialities, they cannot be trusted. Their fearlessness makes them unpredictable and, therefore, a threat." Tarek couldn't stay silent any longer. "You're wrong," he said, his voice firm. "Their bravery isn't a threat, it's a strength. I've seen it. They care for each other in ways we can't comprehend. They rebuild after disasters, they protect those who are vulnerable, and they find meaning even in the face of destruction. The room fell silent, the weight of Tarek's words hanging in the air. The debate. The council erupted into a heated discussion. Some agreed with Arinox, viewing humanity's courage as a potential danger to the galaxy. Others were intrigued by the operative's findings, seeing an opportunity to learn from the humans.